fellow Falcoholics. What is up? Welcome to the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. I'm your host, Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin, joined by my co-host for Trench Talk here on Dirty Birds and Brews. He is Jordan Watkins at Big 75. Fella, Jordan, welcome back to, unfortunately, another loss show, but, you know, I think it helps when you've got someone to process the game with, and that's what we're going to help you guys do here. But before we get to that, Jordan, how you doing today?
I tell you what, it's been over 24 hours now since the game. So in that regard, I'm a little bit better. But you know, if you're gonna get somebody up at 6:15, 6:30 in the morning to watch a game, I got to get some more than that. So that was a tough watch. But you know, on a different week, on to Houston.
Yep, on to Houston. You know, it's sort of a bury the tape game for Desmond Ritter. I hope that he can move past it. And to be fair to him, we're gonna open with something positive first. But to be fair to Ritter, He did bounce back in the second half and had a better second half. I would still hesitate to call it good, but or even mediocre. But it wasn't catastrophic second half. So you know that there was at least that. But guys, we're gonna start things off on a positive note today. Let's talk about the defense, which of course has continued to be excellent, which was very surprising. Unfortunately, the offense and defense aren't really coming together at this stage, but we'll at least heap some praise on the folks that deserve it. And the offensive line, too, bounce back game. So some positive steps and, of course, some negative steps. We'll cover it all here on today's Trench Talk. But before we do, want to get to a quick word from our sponsor, BetOnline.ag. Guys, football is back, and BetOnline is your number one information source for all your sports wagering info with up-to-the-minute stats, news, scores, and matchup breakdowns. You can get the latest game odds, spreads, and totals from the NFL and college football at your fingertips with BetOnline's real-time updates on statistics, news, and odds from Week 1 all the way to the college football playoff and Super Bowl. BetOnline gives you access to the best football promotions and contests available anywhere online. You know, once again, I'm going into this week saying probably don't bet on the Falcons. You know, I would probably recommend, I think in general, it's a good idea to not bet on your own team other than props. I think props, actually, because you have the knowledge of the team, or at least you should, that you can make that work. But outcome of games, it's too much with your heart, and you know it's too prone to mistakes. But I did pick the Jaguars last week, so you know my heart didn't get in the way of logic last week. But no matter what you want to do, guys, head to the website betonline.ag today, or use your mobile device to get in on the action. Just remember to use our promo code BELIEVE, that's BLEAV, to receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit. BetOnline, where the game starts. Okay, Jordan, we're going to start positive. We're going to start with the defense, which once again came to play, kept the game close as long as they feasibly could, and 7 of the points were absolutely not their fault in any way. 7 of their points obviously coming from the Jaguars' pick 6. And Atlanta, once again, I think really held the opposing offense in check. 7 of the points, of course, come on that blown coverage, which upon my rewatch, I'm pretty sure it was A.J. Terrell's mistake on that blown coverage touchdown, given the fact that Bates was not really over there, and also that I find it hard to believe they would single up Jesse Bates against Calvin Ridley like on purpose. That doesn't really seem like something that would typically happen, but disappointing that it ended the way it did. But I think the defense in this one pretty much did everything they could to keep the team in this, and again we had the offense sort of come short. But your thoughts? We'll start generally first, and then, of course, we'll dive into the defensive line. But, you know, another game where the defense really plays well.
You know, I have to remind myself that I'm grading the defense with a scale right now. And I say that because, like I said, it's a good defensive game. Now, the unfortunate thing is because of the situation in the offense right now, even a good game might not cut it, right? So, for example, you talk about the blown assignment. That's 2 weeks in a row now where we've said, at least coverage-wise, this is a pretty good game, but there is that blown coverage on the back end, right? Sam Laporta got us last week against Detroit, and now it happens again this week. So, obviously, even when the offense is clicking, hopefully it can get to a point where it's clicking and humming. Things like that can't happen because, honestly, sometimes that one play really is all you need to be the change and the difference in the game. So, but, I mean, if you look at it, I mean, besides that, right? So, you had that and you had the pick 6. So, take those 14 points. I mean, that's a 9-point performance that you gave as a defense, which again, you should be able to win with that. So, yeah, I think just overall, and I'll get into more specifics with David Onyemata in a second. But overall, again, this is a defense that I feel like every single week I feel confident going out there and thinking that they can do enough to keep us in games. And yeah, I think it was just another example of that on Sunday.
Yeah, I agree. And we've seen some really nice things, obviously, from the free agents that you mentioned. David Onyemata has continued to just be this dynamic force next to Grady Jarrett. And those two, it's a special pairing, and I'm so glad that we have that now. We've been asking for that for so long. We finally get it. It seems like it's not a flash in the pan that these two really are going to be one of the top interior duos in the NFL, and that's going to give the Falcons a chance every single week on defense because they will have the ability, especially against teams that are weaker on the interior, to just sort of wreck the game. And they've been doing a great job of that so far, sort of overcoming a lack of edge rush presence. But the Falcons, the good news is that the Falcons have good run defending edge rushers. Calais Campbell had some picture perfect run stops this week, and he's right where I expected him to be as one of the NFL's premier edge defending run defending edge rushers. Just the pass rush from the outside has not quite been delivering the way we hope. Although I will say on that note, Bud Dupree has started to string together some better performances, and we are starting to see a little bit more of Arnold Ebiketie. But one guy I wanted to touch on before we dive heavy into the defensive line was Nate Landman, who it seems like, maybe that performance in week 2 was not a flash in the pan. Nate Landman once again having a really strong game. And we talked about his story and how his path to get here and how cool it is that he's getting his opportunity. But what do you think about Nate Landman so far? Now we've seen 2 full games.
Yeah, I mean, again, we talked about it before back when he was at Colorado, how without an injury, who knows how high up he was going to get drafted, right? In terms of the athleticism, he was all over the field for the Buffs on his time there. So it's one of those things where it's a guy that can be productive if he gets an opportunity. Now he has one. Of course, it's unfortunate as to why and how he got it, right? Talking about Troy Anderson being hurt, but you feel confident knowing that, especially after the first game, it's like, okay, I see this Nate Landman guy. That's not bad. And so the first thought is you think, okay, if we need him in a pinch, he's there. That's kind of your first thought. But now you've seen it repetitive. We'll see what happens again this week with a young quarterback coming up. But you've seen his ability now to put 2 games in a row. Now if you do it 3 times in a row, and I know this is not the quarterback position, so I think it's a little bit different in terms of sample size to really believe something. But I think you put 3 solid games in a row. It's like, okay, even though we just lost Troy Anderson, I know we were all excited to see what he was going to do in this defense. That that next step down, it's not that bad at all, right? Mm-hmm. I know we were talking about how I hate the phrase "next man up" because it doesn't really fit for everybody. But right now, Nate Landman is trying to prove that you really can use that phrase with him in the situation.
Yeah, exactly. And the team definitely proved themselves correct on that call with basically clearing the way for Nate Landman to be the primary backup and just sort of, I think a lot of people were concerned. It's like, oh, you're going to have this UDFA as your primary linebacker backup, mm-hmm. and then just a bunch of special teams guys. And it's like, yeah, they that was the correct call, clearly, to give Landman that opportunity. And while he didn't match, his week 2, like 89 grade or whatever, he still had a very good grade this week. I think he had finished like a 72.2, which is 72. Obviously well above average. So nice game there. Jesse Bates still incredible. Calais Campbell another great game. 2 guys that one guy I will say, Taquan Graham, who sort of struggled the first 3 weeks, he did have his best game. Only played 17 snaps, so he's definitely more of a rotational player right now, which is probably the best fit for him. Mm-hmm. But he did have his best game too. So it's nice to see him have a bounce back after sort of a lighter opening. Same thing with Richie Grant, had his best game, even though he did miss that sack on the Calvin Ridley touchdown that would have obviously wiped out that mistake on the back end. So yeah, would like to have that. But another guy, Jeff Okudah, finally starts, plays mm-hmm. the majority of the game, and he grades out extremely well. 74.9 PFF grade. And I think that matches the eye test too, where he looked healthy, looked ready to go, and looked aggressive. And I was happy from what I saw from Okudah this week.
No, absolutely. You got that one PBU on the side where I believe it was Arnold Ebiketie absolutely demolished Trevor Lawrence, which was beautiful to see. But the thing for me is you can definitely tell. I think they did a good job with him coming back from that ankle injury where, of course, we all wanted to ask the questions. You get the reports that he's in practice. And so it's, all right, well, he's practicing. When is he going to be out there? When is he going to be out there? They brought him slowly back last week, right? With they played a couple snaps here and there against Detroit. And then it's like, okay, boom, now here we go. So I think they handled this the right way. And I think also to your point, speaking about that, Taquan Graham's another one of those guys. I think that just mentally, sometimes when you have a serious injury, it takes you a minute. You have to slow down, be comfortable in the game again. So hoping that this can be the start for him as well. In terms of, again, you talk about the D-line rotation that we have. The fact that we can go to him, spell some guys for a couple of plays. And we all know how good he can be against the run too. So, I just think it was a matter of time for him to get that feel again of being healthy. And now I think, now he has a game where, again, even in just 17 snaps, you can look at the tape and say, okay, that looks and feels like me again. So I think that was big for him.
Yeah, I'm happy to see that because I think we all knew. I mean, I wasn't too concerned with his slow start for the reasons you mentioned too. Like coming back from a serious injury, it takes time, especially in the NFL where you're like, if you're only going 90%, that can be catastrophic, like because of how good everyone is. So good to see him come back, get rotated back in. Another guy before we start to move towards the offensive side, unfortunately, that was really interesting to see. DeMarco Hellams gets the snaps over Jalen Hawkins, which doesn't shock me from a long-term perspective. This is Hawkins' final year on his rookie contract. And Hellams is a fresh, rookie, but Hellams comes in, plays 12 snaps. Jalen Hawkins does not play any snaps, essentially.
Right.
And didn't necessarily make a ton of plays, but PFF had him graded out, slightly, basically average around the 60s, which is a good first showing from a 7th round rookie. And I thought he looked the part, didn't look out of place at all, playing that sort of, they sort of rotated him, and it seemed like in almost like dime linebacker on those third downs. So interesting personnel decision there, going to Hellams. What did you think about his debut?
Well, no, I think he was solid, and I always say this about rookies: the main thing for me in your debut, unless you're like a running back, quarterback, receiver, things like that, the main thing for me is I don't want to hear your name called on a big play. So we already talked about a blown coverage before, or it wasn't like a big missed tackle or anything like that. So that's the main thing for him. But also, I think that's just more of a telling point of where they are with Jalen Hawkins. Like you said, last year of his rookie deal, not a good sign, obviously, for him that the rookie DeMarco Hellams is coming in and now I believe had more snaps than Jalen Hawkins did in this game. So that was pretty telling for me too. You can look at it both ways, right? Positive side is, man, DeMarco Hellams is obviously showing some good things and coaching staff trust him. The other side of it is, man, Jalen Hawkins, what's going on there, and why haven't you been able to take that next step or next leap that they were hoping for?
Yeah, exactly. And with Jalen Hawkins, I think he's just a solid veteran. There doesn't seem to be a ton of upside there. I think he's a reliable player. I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if he returns given his flexibility to play multiple spots and all that stuff. Mm-hmm. But I also wouldn't shock me if they want to see what they have in a guy like Hellams, who was a fresh rookie, maybe has a little bit more upside. And I think in the preseason we saw this guy looked significantly better in coverage than I think anyone had thought, given his reputation as more of this enforcing box safety. But again, those Nick Saban Alabama safeties, especially when you watch his college tape, he wasn't just a box safety there. He played all three spots. He played in the box. He played deep. He played that sort of cover two, split zone, and wasn't a liability. And then in the preseason is just making plays all over the place, obviously against, the second, third stringers, but that's still impressive especially for a 7th rounder. So definitely excited to see what we can get from Hellams, who may emerge as the sort of third safety long term. I mean, and I wouldn't say that it's impossible that he could emerge as a future starter either. That's obviously pretty early for any sort of definitive statements on that, but you have to like that he's found his way onto the field in the first, quarter of the season, even though the NFL ruined that with their 17-game schedule.
No, absolutely. And I think to your point too, because you talked about the plays he was making in preseason. Well, and I guess it's sort of to say you're supposed to pop. against some of those, like you said, third string, fourth string guys, some guys that are just doing their best to try to make a team. It's okay. If you're going to be out there, you got to show something. You got to make something happen. And again, I know I always hark back to Arnold Ebiketie, and I'll keep doing it just because I believe there's so much potential there. When he had that the rush, I think it was a strip sack against the Dolphins, right? It's like, okay, yeah, you're going up against a tackle of who knows if he made the roster, didn't make the roster. But yeah, if you're going up against him, that has to be a win, right? Like that's more so like you look at it a whole different way. Let's say if it was the other way around. He gets pancaked by it. It's like, oh man, Arnold Ebiketie just got pancaked by this fourth stringer or whatever. Like that's how everyone would look at it. But the fact that I could watch that rush and say, okay, yeah, you did beat that guy. You're supposed to beat that guy. Like you popped. Like I expect you to in that matchup. And that's the thing too with DeMarco Helms, the fact that he was, and it wasn't just I don't know, he's just kind of out there feel like that kind of shows me sometimes too of like what a player can be.
Yeah. No, I love to see that from guys. You want your guys to stand out in the preseason, especially when you're going against the second, third string guys who, again, we've made it clear on this program, like if you're playing in the NFL in any capacity, you're one of the best football players in the world. Mm-hmm. But in the context of the NFL, you need to be standing out against that quote unquote lower level of competition if you want to make an impact on Sundays in the regular season. And that's exactly what we saw from Helms. So very encouraging start for the rookie safety. Let's transition to the offense. And again, we'll start on a positive note. Yeah. We'll save the overall offensive takes for later, but I did want to shout out first, since this is Trench Talk, the offensive line, who as a unit definitely had a bounce back game, top to bottom. It wasn't flawless. No one's expecting it to be flawless, for the record, in case anybody was curious about that. We're not expecting perfection, but right off the top, Chris Lindstrom, immediately, he's the number one offensive lineman in this game, allows no pressures, no hurries, no nothing, and is right back to an elite offensive grade. I think he had almost a 90 grade in this game. So it's nice to see Lindstrom bounce back, and he was the one of all the guys in this offensive line that I didn't really have any concern about. And I think we talked about this, but still nice to see him bounce back.
Absolutely. And that's what you expect, right? That's why they paid him all that money. And again, I'm looking at some of the grades now too. It's, sometimes the overall grade can be a little deceiving because, hey, it might be in this phase of the game, they were really, really good. And then that's what outweighs everything else, because then it could be these other grades over here, not so much. But no, he was elite in all grades, all facets. And again, that's the Chris Lindstrom that we come to love in Atlanta. And I think the thing for me is going into the season when you had your ideas and expectations of what the Falcons could do, what this offense could do. It started with, again, the offensive line and how good we thought they were going to be. And of course, that starts with Chris Lindstrom. So it's good to see him again look like the Chris Lindstrom that we all know.
Yeah, exactly. And I definitely like to use PFF grades, especially for offensive linemen, because outside of a few other stats like pressures allowed and stuff like that, it's a hard to quantify offensive line play without actually going like play by play and evaluating. So, but on this program, we don't take PFF grades as gospel. So we will be sure to let you know if we disagree with any of the grades. But I think Lindstrom's was spot on this week. An interesting one. Also, Caleb McGarry definitely did have a better game this week. I think he finished with like a 69 overall grade, but particularly had high marks in pass pro. He did allow one pressure, which also turned into a hit. But again, not the worst outcome for McGarry, considering what we've seen the last couple of weeks. Nice to see him bounce back as well. And we just need more consistency. No one's expecting perfect pass blocking from McGarry. We just can't have him giving up 2-3 sacks in a game.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like you said, not everyone's going to play a perfect game. And we know that, especially up front. So it's just, I don't want to be in a situation, and I know no other Falcons fan does too, where it's anytime we drop back and pass, you look immediately at the right tackle and see like, oh, what's going on over here? Now, in this game, that was not the case because you had to do it in other places. But no, I mean, again, it's as long as you could get average to above average consistency from Caleb McGarry, I think we're okay, at the right tackle. And that's more so, I think, what had been so alarming or confusing for people earlier on, those first 3 games of the season, because we weren't getting even that. So no, good. It was good to see him have a better game. And I think there's still another another at least a little tick up that he can get to as well.
Yeah, I agree. And you mentioned that it wasn't McGarry's problem certainly this week. Another guy who certainly wasn't a problem was Drew Dahlman. He did allow 2 hurries, but was an elite run blocker in this game. And I think Dahlman once again has, really shown that the team was right for sticking with him and not doing what I said and going and drafting another center. So, shout out to Dahlman for his play. The 2 guys who struggled the most this week were Matthew Bergeron, who didn't, I think, have a bad game, but I think didn't really make a plus either. I would say he had a pretty mediocre sort of inoffensive game, which again, for a rookie offensive lineman, you're probably hoping to have that most weeks where he's not standing out in a negative light. And then hopefully those flash plays will start to come up more as well. The bigger surprise, I think, was Jake Matthews, who gave up the 2 sacks and 4 total pressures. Again, going up against a guy that's a super underrated pass rusher, in my opinion. He's not talked about with the NFL's top guys, but I think he's right there, is the other Josh Allen, who had 3 sacks on the day and just whooped Jake Matthews a couple of times. Now, I think Jake Matthews on the whole actually did have a pretty good day, but those sacks were a big deal. And, I know some people are panicking about Jake Matthews saying, oh, he's aging. We need to, like, Jake Matthews is like 31 years old. He's not that old, guys.
He's just been here for so long.
He got here as a rookie, as a young player, and has just been the left tackle since like 2014. So like, he's actually not to the age where you would be like, oh, this guy's on his last season. Now, it would still be wise to start grooming an eventual successor, but like, I don't think this was like a Jake Matthews is getting old game. This is just he went up against one of the best edge rushers in the NFL and got beat sometimes game.
Yeah, and it happens. And the thing for me with Josh Allen, and I was seeing this, watching this tape coming into this week, he's just streaky. He'll have games like this, and then there will be another game where it's, he's not, I don't want to say non-existent, but he's not flashing like this, right? Like, I don't think he does it consistently enough as everyone thought when Jacksonville picked him at 7th a few years ago. So that was the thing for me. It was, again, when you go into certain games, if there's a guy on the other side of the ball and that, again, they can have those moments, you always have to say, don't let that moment be against you this week. And so, no, for Jake Matthews, Josh Allen had his moment, this week. So that was, like I said, that was the unfortunate thing. And I mean, there are a lot of things, though, I feel like that go on with that. Because I know Jake Matthews, he gets credited for the 3 sacks. I believe there was one, I can't remember exactly when in the game, but I think Desmond was actually moving away from some other pressure. So he kind of walked into the sack. So that's not really on Jake. But there's some other things, though, that I must say I have questions about when it comes to, and this is, again, it's kind of more of an overall offensive question, but it plays into the O-line because sometimes I think that sacks come because of the concepts that they're trying to do or not using. Yeah,
I agree. And that's probably a good time to transition, unfortunately, into the overall offense, which the run game was awesome. This was against one of the NFL's better run defenses through the first 3 weeks of the season. Bijan comes out, gets that 100-yard game, looks awesome throughout. The run blocking is really good. Tyler Algier didn't get as many carries. I mean, it's clearly starting to become Bijan's show, but so the run game, I think, is sort of without reproach. I think they did a great job there. In fact, I would say that they probably have to start leaning even more on that somehow, just because of how dire the passing game is. And again, this leads us into our discussion of the passing game, where it's gotten worse from last week. Last week, it looked like the passing game had bottomed out, and somehow it was worse this week. And again, like we talked about last week, like, Ritter's going to have to stop putting the ball in harm's way, because sooner or later that luck is going to run out. And it ran out on Sunday with Ritter throwing a pick 6 and then immediately another interception. I mean, Jordan, it's getting to the point where it's starting to become a real problem, to where this is actually actively hamstringing the offense now with Ritter's level of play.
Oh, I agree. And I believe I said this last week or a couple of weeks ago. I wish that when I look at this offense, I could just solely put it on Desmond Ritter, right? Like, that was coming into this year, that was the big question, right? It wasn't the O-line, how they were going to look, or the receiving group. No, I know some people wanted that extra receiver. I'm like, no, I get it. You can always want more, but I think you have enough. And so it was just going to be, how is Desmond Ritter? We know we saw 4 games out of him last year. Everyone made a big deal about him not playing a lot in the preseason. So it's like, okay, how's it going to look? Right. And you've seen some good moments. We all know, and we love to harp on the second half of the Green Bay game. Even the second half, like you said, it was better than the first half in this game. So there's that. But also at the same time, I question exactly some of the game plan and scheming for things that help them be successful, right? Where we're running a lot of 2-man routes. If a lot of people notice that, and part of that is, again, those take a long time to develop, right? So here's my question too, and this is where I say it goes back to the offensive line, where it's like I'm not gonna fully blame them for steps from some of the sacks. Because if you do know that your O-line is somewhat, I don't want to say compromised, because again, I don't think they're bad, but they had their struggles, right?
Yeah.
So the thing is, if you know that, why not change up the approach and try to get something out a little bit quicker? And again, I think that's just something that will help Desmond be in a better rhythm too earlier on. I think that's one of the problems, is he's not in a rhythm up until it gets later on in the game. So he's holding on to the ball, trying to make things happen down the field. That just gives the pass rush a little bit more time. And yeah, I mean, as you see, there's a lot of times where the Falcons will have 2 or sometimes 3 guys in the same vicinity on the field. So it's just really difficult all the way around. Like, again, I'm not saying this to cope for Desmond Ritter. He obviously has to be a lot better. And I think, that's kind of the statement of the day.
Yeah.
But there's some things around him too, game plan and scheme wise, that I think that is really not doing him is doing him a disservice, rather, if you will.
Yeah, and it's never just one thing that causes that level of offensive problem. Now maybe you could have individual games where it's like, oh yeah, this was definitely on this player, the quarterback really screwed up this week or whatever.
Right.
But the offensive line struggles have certainly contributed, and I think that you're correct with your critique of the schematic issues. And then, of course, Desmond Ritter happening to have what I think is his worst game from a decision-making standpoint this week as well. It all compounded to another just disastrous performance. And, we talked about it last week. We've talked about it on multiple shows, that it doesn't seem like there's a lot of quick hitters in this offense. It doesn't seem like there's a lot of layups for the quarterback, and it's forcing Desmond to really hold the ball. I also think that the other side of that is that a lot of the quick hitters that they have, Ritter has not been able to process quick enough to hit. So if he needs that extra second, can you really have these quick timing routes for him if he's not going to be able to hit them? And that is a critical problem, because he has to be able to quickly process and hit those quick routes, or he's going to always be taking sacks. You have to be able to analyze what's happening in front of you and hit those quick plays if you need to. I think where Ritter has typically been the best is like intermediate throws, but this week we saw him just make egregiously bad reads on several throws where he just threw it right to defenders and threw it into heavy coverage or just didn't see defenders. And again, some of that I think certainly has to do with the fact that I think he's feeling the pressure of the offensive line, even when it's not there, because of the last several weeks of pass blocking issues. His internal clock is trying to speed up because he's anticipating pressure. So he's not even able to sort of sit there and read even when he has time, because his internal clock is trying to speed up. And at the same time, the internal clock is like a tick slow on these, because he's just not comfortable processing and reading at this stage. Like, he just seems like he's a tick behind where he needs to be in the processing department. And I don't know I don't know what else to do about that. I mean, he has to get there, and he has to get there quick. But this is something we brought up on the postgame show, is like this sort of stuff where he was behind in his timing, it should have been more obvious before now. And it's one of those things that goes back to last year of, why wasn't he given more games last year? We know why. Like, they decided they were going to try to make the playoffs with Marcus Mariota, which was a big mistake. But also, you look, he didn't play in the preseason either. We've talked about that, and whether that's overblown or not. But now, for better or for worse, he has to take these lumps and get these live game reps now in a season where the expectations are for this team to make the playoffs. And of course, as a result, the pitchforks have come out, and they've come out quick, because if he was doing this last year, people would have been like, oh, he's a rookie, we're not making the playoffs, let's just let him take his lumps. Now the pressure's turned up by 10 because this is a year where they're expected to make the playoffs, and it's leading to a lot of very harsh criticism very quickly.
Yeah, and I want to clarify on something too, because I saw people online saying they're posting about, oh, this team isn't a contender and stuff like that. That's fine. My thing though always is, once you make the playoffs, anything can happen. And it's like you said, this is a team that it was expected. You make all these moves, right? You're trying to make something happen. And outside of a couple of teams, maybe one team every generation or so that seems like they can contend every year. Now those windows close very quickly. So yeah, if you're trying to make the playoffs, you're trying to make something happen, right? Like, I don't think everyone has the window like the 49ers do, where they've made the NFC Championship, was it 3 of the last 4 or 5 years? That doesn't usually happen. Or of course, we know about the Patriots. And even with the Patriots, with Tom Brady, remember, they took some time off before they were back in the Super Bowl and making things like that happen too. So those windows are not very long usually outside of that. So obviously Falcons fans know that better than most, because there was 2016, and then we're still looking for a winning season ever since 2017. And if you're going to make all those moves, we talked about David Onyemata, we talked about Calais Campbell, you bring in Bijan Robinson, all these things, you're expecting to make things happen, but you also expect that you're going to have the guy that's the signal caller on offense to be at a level and be at a position to make the whole orchestra work. And right now it's, the violins might be playing the right note, but the cellos are on a different beat, or the bass has got the right cadence going with the conductor, but then it's the violas that are off a little bit. If you can't tell, I'm an orchestra nerd.
Oh man,
so,
hashtag viola gang. Yeah,
there you go. I did violin, cello, and bass.
Oh man, I was clarinet. Yeah.
Nice. But so yeah, and at the end of the day, as we all know, like, it's always going to fall on the signal caller and the play caller. So, Arthur Smith has some things, he has to go over and try to change and adjust. Desmond Ritter has some too, because like you said, and we've been saying this whole time, the expectations are the expectations. You have them now. Nobody had them last year. So it's cool to be a little bit more loose and comfortable. Like, it was surprising for all of us, and not even just from good Falcons football. It was surprising how bad the division was last year, where it's like, hey, we actually have a chance to do something. Now it's, again, you're expected to do it. So again, with this start, even though the 2-0 feeling felt good, there were still some things in there where it's just like, yeah, but this has to get cleaned up. That has to get cleaned up. Otherwise, it's going to bite you. And now it's biting you.
Yeah. So and again, like, from a record standpoint, this team is exactly where I personally thought they would be right now. They're in a perfectly fine place in terms of their record at 2-2. There's no, the record doesn't suggest any sort of, we need to burn it down or drastically change course. But it's, I think the problem is, you're on a 2-game losing streak, and the offense is getting worse by the week. And it's that is, I think, why the drastic takes have come out. So again, because you were able to get to 2-2, you have more leeway to be like, okay, we can be patient and try to fix this the old fashioned way. But that 2-game cushion is now gone. Like, you're 2-2 now. So you've lost your cushion. Now you got to start getting back to the dubs, and maybe the cure for what ails Desmond Ritter is just playing at home, undefeated at home, right?
Yeah.
Which is weird, but whatever. So they've got to get back on the horse and start fixing the problems with this offense. And the thing about it is, like, if Ritter takes small steps forward every week from here on out, he's not going to be in any danger of losing his job. But games like week 4 against the Jaguars, those will end your NFL career quickly if you start stacking those, if you don't start showing improvement, because you can get away with being the 25th best quarterback as what is essentially a rookie. You can sort of be in that below average category as long as you're not actively tanking your team. But when you get into that 34 of 34, which is what Ritter is now according to PFF, and with Zach Wilson having a good game last night, maybe he is actually the 32nd quarterback in the league at this stage. That won't last long. Even if you're a young quarterback, the leash is not very long for Ritter for various reasons, and we know that. Now, I know the team is committed to him, and they should, like, at least give him a shot to right the ship here for at least a few more weeks. Nobody of us is calling for Ritter to get yoinked, like, permanently. But because he's only a 3rd-round pick, it cuts both ways. Like, you didn't invest a lot in him, but also you didn't invest a lot in him. So, like, there's not really this pressure to be like, we have to play him this year and see what he is, like it would be if he was Bryce Young, where Bryce Young is also having a disastrous start to his NFL career, but he's the first overall pick that you just traded multiple first rounders for. You can't bench him. You have no choice. You're committed. With Ritter, the truth is, like, you're really not committed. Like, I mean, you're verbally committed, and like, obviously it would be nice if you could develop him. But ultimately, if he's tanking your offense, there's not this pressure to continue playing him like there would be if he was a first round pick. And like I said, it cuts both ways. Like, he was cheap to get into, cheap to get out of, unfortunately for Ritter. So his leash may not be as long as it would be for some of these other young quarterbacks.
Yeah, without a doubt. And it's going to be interesting because we're talking about the whispers from the outside, right?
Yeah.
We're going to get louder this next week. The reason why I'm saying that is because we're talking about young quarterback, not looking this way, that way, needs more time. Okay, look at the young quarterback that's about to come into the Benz next week. See how the start that he's had so far. Like, this Houston team is a lot better than what I think a lot of people, myself included, expected. And I'm happy to see that because I am a big D'Amico Ryans fan, so I'm happy that he's finding success. But a big part of why they're better is because the quarterback, C.J. Stroud, is really, really good. And it seemed like a lot of people were kind of ready or not convinced with him coming into the draft. And I was like, nope, I saw him play against Georgia. That's all I needed. I think he's going to be legit. So now if you're Desmond, again, a lot of the talks are going to be, here's this young quarterback. And I get, C.J. Stroud was a first-round pick. But still, it's, well, look at this young quarterback that's adapted to the league right away and is doing this, doing that. Why can't our quarterback do that too? Like that's just going to be, the narrative if things don't turn around and if it doesn't look a certain way too on Sunday.
Yeah, I mean, it's going to put a microscope on it, that comparison. And, we talked about it last week that C.J. Stroud isn't a big-time outlier for a rookie quarterback, that he has hit the ground running, is playing really well, and good for him. But the comparison is going to happen for a lot of reasons, right? Because Ritter is struggling, C.J. Stroud is not. They're both young quarterbacks with very few starts under their belt. But I wouldn't necessarily say you should make CJ Stroud the barometer of what a rookie quarterback should look like.
I agree.
Because he's, and I don't think you're saying that either, but some people are. They're like, oh, well, look at CJ Stroud. Ritter's not CJ Stroud, so he's a bust. It's like, well, that's probably not the one I would say, like, that's the barometer for whether you're, like, playing well enough as a rookie. CJ Stroud is sort of, I mean, he's, I think, the best rookie start since Joe Burrow, which is good for him, but it's been like 3 years since we've seen a rookie play like that. So, I mean, you look around the league, most of the time it's pretty mediocre at best for rookie quarterbacks.
Mm-hmm.
So we'll see. We'll see how it develops. I'm certainly not calling for Ritter to be yoinked at this point. I was saying they might want to consider it at halftime of last week because I didn't want his confidence to get completely wrecked if it was going to be a rout. Luckily, I think they made the right call by putting him back in and letting him have a better second half, even though it didn't. If Drake London's foot comes down an inch closer, we're probably feeling a lot different about this game. I still think it would have been improbable for that comeback to happen. But, I think that he did play better in that second half. Now we need it to be like consistent. Like, we need to take a step forward this week too. But if he continues trending downward, that's what's going to lead to getting pulled for a guy in Taylor Heineke who is on a very incentive-heavy contract, and I know he signed here and said he was fine being Ritter's backup, but I think Taylor Heineke's a smart guy, and I think he sees the potential for him to get another opportunity to start here in Atlanta. And, we'll see 3, 4, 5 weeks from now if Heineke was making a very smart call or not, in terms of his decision to sign here.
Yeah, well, I mean, not even just that, being a smart guy, he's a competitor.
Oh, yeah.
So, I mean, it's hard to see, and I'm not saying this to say that he's preying on Desmond Ritter's downfall. I'm not doing that.
No, definitely not.
It's just a standpoint of, if you see something going a certain way at a position, and it's your position, you the competitor in you just kind of, you can't help but sit there and be like, man, I know I can do better than this, or like, I need to be out there because I can make that happen. And honestly, like, you want people with that type of mentality. Yes. You don't want someone on the bench or thinking, man, it's not looking good out there. I don't think I could do anything else differently, or I can do anything else better. So I want him to have that mindset. And I'm sure, like, he's going to be chomping at the bit, of course. And just, again, from the standpoint of, he's from the area, And we saw how much of a gamer he was a few years ago when they played in Atlanta and when he was still in Washington. So, yeah, I know he's going to want to be ready to go and get after it. And, yeah, like I couldn't – like I said, I can't blame him for it. I want him to be competitive in that way.
Yeah, I agree. And again, it's not that antagonistic where he's like, oh, I'm just waiting for Ritter to fail so I can – no, but I think it's he's a competitor. He knows that he's got a young quarterback ahead of him that was unproven. So there's a decent chance that if things don't go well, that he will have an opportunity to play here. And we'll see how that pans out. But, whether I think Taylor Heinicke, we know what to expect. He's going to be a risk taker. He's going to push the ball downfield. But what Heinicke would probably be doing better now is not necessarily making the egregious errors that Ritter made last week. I don't think the number of turnovers would necessarily be lower, but they would be from him unleashing the dragon, downfield, not necessarily from not seeing defenders over the middle and stuff like that. But, we'll have to see how it develops. I'm pulling for Ritter. I know you are as well. He's a young quarterback. He's dealing with a lot of adversity right now, and the criticism is going to be intense. So this is when you have to show it, because if Ritter doesn't prove it here soon, there may not be another opportunity for him in the NFL. That's a third-round pick. The list of that's part of the reason why third-round picks don't often turn into franchise quarterbacks, is because if you don't show it immediately, teams aren't lining up to give you a starting job. Whereas former first-rounders, they're like, oh, yeah, sure, come on in. Like, we want you. So fair or not, that's where Ritter will be looking if he can't right the ship, and I certainly hope that he can. I do want to push back on one thing that people are saying about Ritter, which is that he doesn't have talent, which is ridiculous. Ritter is very talented, like athletically. I think he has an above average arm. I think in college, he actually showed that he was a very quick and efficient processor. His best trait, I think, was identifying one-on-one matchups and knowing where to go with the football. I think right now the processing is the issue, that he's just a tick slow. And he's as a result, he's making poor decisions with the football because he's behind where he needs to be in his progressions and is rushing. That doesn't have anything to do with a lack of talent. Like, he's plenty talented to be an NFL quarterback. It's not a lack of talent. It's not a lack of upside or anything like that. Now, he's not on the level of like Anthony Richardson or something like that, where this is like, oh, this is the perfect 10 quarterback with a cannon attached to his body. Like, but no one was expecting that. So he has to show that gradual improvement, but it's not like Ritter's not talented enough to make it in this league. It's a processing issue. And the good thing about processing stuff is that is stuff that can be fixed. So.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with you. I don't look at Desmond and say talent and skill that's not the problem here. And again, I'll say this: there's only a couple of quarterbacks I feel like, no matter what scheme or system you have, what flaws might be there's only a very handful throughout the history of the NFL that's like, all right, it doesn't matter because we have that guy, right? Obviously, 15 in Kansas City. I think for the most part, it doesn't matter what's around him; he's going to find a way to make it work. You saw obviously Tom Brady do it in New England with the weapons or lack thereof at times that were there. So I go back to this point saying, again, if you look at some of the things that are going on, as wherever you think of Desmond Ritter as a talent, as a quarterback, it's not, I'm not going to wow people with the statement of he isn't good enough right now to overcome some of the other shortcomings of this offense. Like, shocker. Okay, we all know that. All right, cool. So my thing is, again, let's still just see something where it's easier for him to make some things work, make things happen again, whether it's easier throws, shorter, intermediate throws. And again, it's an athletic dude. I know Arthur Smith had the comment after the game last week saying, or I think it was actually Green Bay. It's like, you don't want to run your quarterback too much, which I get, but you're not running him enough. Like, there is a good balance in there. And again, I think that's just something, let him use his legs and that athleticism we talked about to make some things work and make things happen. And again, that'll slow him down a little bit. Also, I wonder the question, where in the world is Scotty Miller? Like, where is he? And I know,
not
like,
involved.
Some people say that. Yeah. Like, people hear me say that, is like, oh man, really? All these problems that you're going to talk about Scotty Miller. Well, here's why I'm saying that. Even if you don't want to throw the ball to him, we're talking about the spacing being off, and you got guys running those clear routes just to create space, and it's just not there. So I don't know, maybe the guy that runs the 4-4 that's just chilling on your bench right now, you might want to bring him in and do some things with that too. So, I asked myself that question because even with that, it's, I look at Kyle Pitts. I don't think he's healthy.
Yeah.
He doesn't run like, and I mean, even with that, like should have had the big play in Detroit, right? It was just, it was a miss, but still, when you just look at him, it just doesn't feel like every single play. It's all there with that MCL, with that knee yet. So, I think about that, but yeah, I just, you can always find a way to use speed on a football field. I'll leave it at that. And that's the fastest guy we have. I'd love to just see him out there. And again, just create space for somebody else too, even if you're not going to throw it to him.
Yeah, I think the biggest criticism of Arthur Smith's offense so far is that the route combinations and the way that the spacing of the offense is set up doesn't do the quarterback any favors.
Yeah.
In fact, I would say it looks pretty amateurish. Now, I don't know if that's people running incorrect routes or not running the routes to the areas of the field that they're necessarily supposed to. Like maybe these guys are supposed to be getting more or less depth, and that's why they're looking so close together, but they really shouldn't be. We didn't call a play. We don't know what the design actually is. So like I will give, a little bit of leeway that some of those plays that I know were highlighted in the quarterback school last week, which was a great video if people haven't watched that yet. Yeah. I will give a little bit of wiggle room that some of those may have been improperly executed on the field, but not everyone is like that. So
yeah. And that's the problem. It's showing up on tape too many times.
Yeah. So, I mean, I don't know why we're not running clear out routes with Scotty Miller. I thought that was like part of the reason he was here. So, if you're going to run a go, like it should be Miller running the go, especially if you're not really intending to throw it. And even if you are, he's the fastest guy on the team. But
exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I know folks are saying, oh, the Falcons don't have any juice. Where's the speed? It's like, well, they have speed. They're just not putting it on the field.
And chilling on the bench. Yeah.
And part of that, again, is I think there's a lack of confidence in Ritter to be able to utilize it. I think there's a lack of confidence in the offensive line to hold up long enough to even utilize it. And I think the Falcons are trying to get as many run blockers out there as possible in terms of the receivers as well, which is why we're seeing so much Matt Collins and those bigger guys out there. But sooner or later, we're gonna have to try something else because the last 2 weeks, what they've been doing, it ain't working. So
exactly.
Bijan Robinson isn't going to take us home every single week. So
right. And that's the thing. Like I don't want to ruin a good thing, especially early. And I say that in terms of with Bijan Robinson. It's obvious he's the best player on that offense. Well, best skill player. Chris Lindstrom might still be the best player on that offense. But I don't want to overuse him. I know everyone's been talking about the depreciation, the devaluing of running backs. You have two really solid running backs, right? Obviously, with Tyler Algier too. I don't want to have to be in a situation where you run him into the ground too early. So, yeah, you have to find something else that works. Because, again, we see some of these deep ball patterns and with other players, right? Drake London runs some. Kyle Pitts might run some. Again, we see a lot of two-man route combinations, which is definitely interesting. But so, yeah, it's not even the fact of not doing it or not trying to call up some things that go deep. It's just, again, like I said, with the fastest guy that you have out there, why not do it with him too?
Yeah, exactly. So there's a lot of criticism to go around, and I think we've done a good job of pointing out various places that we have issues, and that it's not going to, like, if Ritter was playing perfectly, there would probably still be some limitations on this passing game from the other issues that we mentioned. Week 4, I think, put it into focus that Ritter was probably the biggest issue. I think that was maybe the first time that happened. I think week 3, there was a pretty strong argument that the offensive line was the biggest issue in that game. But we're going to have to see how it develops. But right now, when there's issues all over the place, everything looks terrible. So we're going to have to get, improvement somewhere. If they all come at once, all of a sudden you could have a bounce back, right? And it could happen this week, but they're going to have to get it fixed quick because there's not, like we said a couple minutes ago, like the cushion is gone now. Like you're back to 2-2. You got to start stacking some more dubs, and maybe a trip home is what it takes, to get the offensive juices flowing again or whatever it is that they need. But certainly hoping for more, and they need more from that offense. And again, shout out to the defense. Every single week, the defense is going to give this offense a chance, even if they're struggling. Yes. Now we need the offense to reward their the defense for their strong play with a good game here and there. At least a few here and there. That's all we need. They only have to be average probably for this defense to win games for them. Like it's a weird situation to be in.
I can't believe we're saying this about the Atlanta Falcons. Like, we were joking before we went live. I said, I've been asking all these questions and prayers about, can I just please have a good Falcons defense? I was like, well, I should have been more specific. I should have said good defense and offense. Because how many times have we seen throughout the years, whether it was Matt Ryan, predominantly a good offensive game, but then it gets blown by some poor defense or lackluster defense late. And now it's the opposite. It's like you said, the defense is doing enough to keep teams in games. I think right now, if you look at stats, they're top 10 in terms of total yards. They are, they're in terms of yards per game allowed, 290 per game. And again, in this age of offense, that's pretty impressive.
Yeah.
And then, a top 10 right now scoring defense as well, which, as we talked about, would look a lot better if it not been for a pick six and now 2 weeks in a row with a busted coverage.
Yep.
So that could be even a better mark. So, no, this defense is good enough. This is the playoff level defense. Now it's time for the offense to reach that caliber and level too.
Yeah. And you mentioned it, Falcons 10th in scoring defense. We haven't seen, this is being recorded on Monday afternoon, so this doesn't include Monday Night Football stats, but 7th in total yardage allowed. Falcons also 5th in passing yardage. If anyone had said that before the season, I would have said you were high. But 6th in yards per play overall. Better than any of us expected. And the run defense after that first big game has started to creep up, and now they're average. They're I think 17th in run defense, and I think they're going to end up a lot better than that.
I agree.
If you look at yards per carry, they're all the way up to 11th now in run defense, and I think that's much closer to what they're going to be. So the defense is going to be able to get it done. Now we need the offense to oblige, and the offense got a long way to go, but I think that the talent is there, like at the skill positions on the offensive line. It just needs to come together in terms of the play calling and Ritter. So I think there is hope for this to get turned around. We're only 4 weeks into the season, but it has to start happening soon, or the cushion is gone. So let's get it done, guys. Let's get it done this week.
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, it's another opportunity, another young team that's coming in. So, good chance to make things happen, get a good win at home before you have to go back on the road.
Yep, exactly. Let's get this dub, which is again not going to be as easy as we thought going into the season with the Texans playing well. Texans defense actually almost exactly the same as the Falcons in terms of statistics. So one of the bigger turnarounds as well in the NFL has been Houston's defense. So
Ryans, telling you.
Such a good. The Texans are incredibly lucky that DeMeco Ryans wanted to go there, because I think he could have had his pick of a lot of teams, and
absolutely,
it was his ties to the Texans the only reason he agreed to go there to that organization. So they're very lucky. They're very lucky to have him. Guys, he's Jordan Watkins at Big 75 Fella here on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. Jordan, anything you'd like to let people know about before we sign off today?
Just again, letting y'all know, tune into the Falcon Fae podcast. Actually, our reaction show is going on right now, I believe. And then, we'll have an episode out later previewing Houston in Atlanta. So Clint Goss and I, we do those 2 shows weekly. One's a reaction show, the other is a preview show. So, some good stuff there. And then, of course, I shall be back, I believe, next week on the live reaction show on the Falcoholic on Sunday, too. So a lot of fun stuff coming.
Absolutely. Really appreciate Jordan. This has been a really fun series. I'm glad we're doing it. I know people are enjoying it too. So thanks guys for tuning in as well. Everyone, I'm Kevin Knight at Falcoholic Kevin. If you enjoyed this episode, please like and subscribe. Leave us that 5-star review on your podcast platform of choice. We'll be back on Wednesday night for Falcoholic Live, and of course have another game preview coming your way for this Houston Texans matchup in week 5. Until then, folks, this show was of course brought to you by betonline.ag. We will see you next time here on the Dirty Birds and Brews podcast. Have a great day, folks.